This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Tonight, the season premiere of Unsolved Mysteries.
While under hypnosis, Bruce Kelly was overwhelmed by vivid images of an American sailor's death during World War II. Later, he was amazed to learn that his vision of the sinking of a submarine actually took place 50 years earlier. How could Bruce Kelly relive in accurate detail events that took place before he was even born? After a killer tornado rips through Woodward, Oklahoma, the town's residents flee to a local hospital. The scene is chaos, and one of the survivors, a young girl named Joan Gay Croft, is carried off by two strangers. More than 40 years later, she is still missing. Pedro Santiago Jr. was his family's pride and joy. Popular, athletic, a good student. Then on December 12, 1990, Pedro was struck by a car in front of his house. The driver callously fled the scene, leaving Pedro to die.
Join me for our dramatic season premiere. Perhaps you may be able to help solve a mystery. What are you afraid of? The dark? Flying? Heights? Many of us harbor at least one secret irrational fear, a phobia. Sometimes when the phobia is serious enough to disrupt normal functioning, we will do almost anything to regain control of our lives. For a man named Bruce Kelly, the attempt to cure his phobias took him to places he could never have imagined.
Bruce Kelly grew up in Glendora, California, a small town just outside Los Angeles. Bruce was a natural athlete who went to college on a full baseball scholarship. Bruce eventually became a sales manager for a medical supply firm. He married, divorced, and as a single parent raised his only daughter. Through it all, Bruce had been plagued by overpowering phobias, a fear of flying in enclosed spaces, which he believed hampered his career, and a fear of water, which was just plain bothersome.
Anytime that I got around a swimming pool, I would be afraid to even go close to the edge of the pool. I would just walk way around it. It even was to the point bad enough where I couldn't sit in a bathtub. I didn't like the feeling of water coming up around me.
I'm going to count from 3 down to 1. When I get to the number 1, you're going to be deep and relaxed.
Over the years, Bruce had sought help from several different medical professionals. Nothing worked. Finally, in desperation, he went to Rick Brown, a hypnotherapist who specializes in an unusual and controversial technique known as past life regression.
On the number 3, you're going there now. On the next number 2, you become a part of it. On 1, you're there.
When I was seeing what I was seeing, and I said to him, this can't be real, his direction at the time was just go with it.
Probably 99% of the people who come to me do not go into past lives. Probably only 1% of the people have spontaneous regressions when working with phobias. And Bruce did have a spontaneous regression to a past life. Where are you?
I'm in a submarine.
What's happening?
I'm drowning.
Bruce was writhing in the chair. He was actually moving around and going through the death scene. Tell me your name.
Johnston.
What is your full name?
James Edward Johnston.
James Edward Johnston.
The hypnosis session had taken an intriguing turn. Bruce Kelly had apparently been thrust into the life of an American sailor named James Edward Johnston, recalling specific details that seemed astonishing.
What's going on?
Bruce said that Johnston had drowned in a submarine, the USS Shark, during World War II. Bruce also said the Shark had gone down near Borneo, just off an island called Celebes.
Are you alone in this hallway?
No, there's another man in the hallway.
Bruce even came up with the name of a man trapped with Johnston in the submarine, Walter Pilgrim.
Everything goes blank, and there's the sense that something's really wrong. There's water coming.
Bruce told Rick Brown that Johnston and Pilgrim had both died at precisely 11:34 p.m. on February 11th, 1942.
Are there any survivors?
No. The memories were just like it was something that happened yesterday. They were very close to the surface. They came up real easily. At first, it was like I was just making it up. Like, this really can't be happening. This really can't be real. I have to be making this up. And I went to the library more to prove that it didn't happen than it did happen.
The next day, armed with the names of 2 sailors, a submarine, and a date, Bruce began a crash course in World War II history. Bruce learned that during the war, 52 American submarines carrying nearly 3,500 sailors were lost at sea. 21 went down in battle, 10 in accidents, and 21 more simply seemed to disappear. No one knew exactly what had happened to them. Incredibly, Bruce found that the very first American sub lost in the war was a USS Shark, the submarine Bruce had named under hypnosis. Bruce was also astounded that the Shark had disappeared near an island called Celebes. Once again, Bruce's memories proved accurate.
They also had a crew roster there, and on the crew roster was James E. Johnston, which was the name that I had come up with under hypnosis. And it also gave the approximate date of loss, which was February 11th, 1942, which was also the date that I'd come up with under hypnosis.
Bruce was further amazed when on the crew list he found the second name he had remembered, Walter Pilgrim, chief electrician's mate.
Hairs were standing up on the back of my neck when I saw it. It was like, oh God, this is real. I was in total disbelief and total shock. And there was also an element of excitement that maybe there is something to this.
Is your mother married?
No.
Is your mother living?
No.
Over the next 6 months, Bruce Kelly saw Rick Brown on average once a week. With each session, more details emerged.
How old were you?
Details that appeared to come from the life of James Edward Johnston.
I'm going to go now to your mother's death. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
In time, Rick Brown began to talk to Bruce Kelly as if Bruce, in fact, were James Edward Johnston.
You're there now. Are you at home or in the hospital?
It's in a home.
Are there many people there?
Yes.
Bruce saw himself as Johnston around age 12, keeping watch at the moment of his mother's death. A young cousin named Elizabeth stood with him. Other memories were far less dramatic, even mundane. Bruce vividly recalled that as Johnston, he always made it a point to eat the end pieces from every loaf of bread. In another session, Bruce remembered that Johnston was born in February of 1921.
As a young man during the Great Depression, he was enrolled in a government work program called the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps. The year was 1938, the place, California. Bruce remembered a young girl there named Molly Lassiter, James Johnston's first love.
I'd like to move forward to a time when you're with Molly. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Moving very quickly now. 3, to a time when you're with Molly. 2, you're there now. 1. Where are you?
We're on the bridge.
What are you doing on the bridge?
We're talking.
What are you talking about?
I'm asking her to run away with me.
Is she afraid?
Yes.
What is she afraid of?
Her father.
And what is she afraid of her father about? Why is she afraid of him?
Probably afraid for me.
And what is she afraid that'll happen to you?
That he might harm me or even kill me.
Do you ever see Molly again?
No.
Bruce Kelly and Rick Brown began to research Johnston's life, and Bruce's memories checked out with remarkable accuracy. Johnston had been in the CCC in 1938 and 1939, stationed at Tule Lake near the California-Oregon border. In 1940, he enlisted in the Navy and served on board the USS Shark. CCC and naval records listed James Edward Johnston's hometown as Jacksonville, Alabama. The date on Johnston's birth certificate confirmed another crucial fact. The month and year Bruce Kelly had remembered under hypnosis were correct, February 1921.
Bruce came up with a significant amount of information that was well past being coincidental. There were too many lines of evidence that pointed to the fact that Bruce Kelly is the reincarnation of James Edward Johnston.
It could be the reincarnation of James. Or it just may be some information that somehow or another that I've tapped into, and it means, you know, it's something else that's happening. I don't know.
Although Bruce's phobias were cured, his life had taken on a new and unexpected dimension. There seemed to be a mysterious synchronicity between Bruce Kelly and James Edward Johnston. Bruce's hypnotherapist, Rick Brown, made 2 trips to Johnston's hometown verifying facts before he finally persuaded Bruce to go there with him. Bruce's first visit was filmed as it happened. What you're about to see is not a recreation. On April 17, 1993, Rick Brown and Bruce Kelly arrived in the town where James Edward Johnston was born and raised, Jacksonville, Alabama. At the house where Johnston and his mother had lived, Bruce Kelly experienced a sudden, strong reaction. Again, these events were filmed as they happened.
There's a lot of stuff here. Back bedroom's right over here.
You feel that? Huh?
Yeah, that's the bedroom.
Okay.
That's the room they stayed in.
Yeah, we've been a lot of places, but this is, yeah, this is doing it, isn't it?
It sure is.
Yeah.
So I remember you used to come in the back. There was an alley back here or a dirt road or something.
Yeah?
It's almost like he wasn't good enough to come in the front door. Moving to the side of the house when I could actually see the bedroom and I knew that was the bedroom, that's when the feelings really started hitting. Remembering that he used to have to come in on the back street and come through the back door, the back porch. I remember that. I remember the feelings of kind of feeling like a second-class citizen. They were poor. She was unmarried. I couldn't vocalize it myself, and somebody off camera said something to the effect of, you've come home. And that's when I got real emotional, because that's exactly what it was.
Say you made it back down this part of the country.
Afterwards, Bruce Kelly went to meet several people who remembered James Edward Johnston as a boy. One of them probably knew Johnston better than anyone else, his cousin Betty.
And we've heard all about you. How are you?
Betty's real name is Elizabeth, and Bruce believes she is the same Elizabeth he saw under hypnosis, the little girl who was with James Edward Johnston when his mother died. Betty remembers her aunt's death, but not the specifics of the scene. However, when she met Bruce, other memories of her cousin, whom she called Edward, flooded back. Betty began to press Bruce for details.
Remember anything about bread?
Yeah, one of the first sessions that Rick and I had, I talked to him about always liking the heel of the bread, wanting to get the end off the bread, because the only reason that meant anything to me was growing up, I was the same way. My mom would bring home a loaf of bread, and the first thing I'd do is open that thing up and grab the heel out of there.
Did you open both ends?
Sometimes.
Edward did.
And I'd get in trouble for it sometimes, too. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Did you went to that house?
Yeah.
The second on the left?
Yeah.
Did you have, what were your feelings there?
Yeah, that's been the emotional high of the trip.
Yeah.
It was real difficult, real emotional.
Do you feel that you are Edward reincarnated?
I don't.
You don't really feel that?
I don't know. I don't know. I've been asked that question so many times, and all I know is for some reason or another, I have all this information about him. I don't know where it comes from. For me to stand here.
I really
and say,
don't know what
yeah,
to believe.
I'm him reincarnated.
I have
That's when it first
doubts,
came out,
but they're just
flying
certain
wasn't
things.
and
Bruce said that Edward used the back door. And this is true, and not everyone would have that knowledge.
The older you get, the more you're going to look at something like reincarnation or anything that offers an answer. And reincarnation, regardless of what this religion or that religion or anything else thinks of it, it offers a solution.
At the Jacksonville Cemetery, a memorial stone has been erected in honor of James Edward Johnston. No one knows exactly how or when Johnston died, except perhaps, just perhaps, Bruce Kelly.
I was in my bunk when the attack happened. And everybody was heading toward their stations. I'd gotten into the first hallway when there was a depth charge. The submarine was rolling and moving. James got to his feet, and he'd gotten 5-10 feet more down the hallway when there was a second depth charge. It was obviously a direct hit. The next memory I have is the area that I'm in filling up with water and filling up real fast. There was another man in the hallway, and he was experiencing the same thing I was, knocked off his feet a couple times, and now trapped in this hallway that was filling up with water. The last real image that I had was the other man in the corridor. You know, that I wasn't alone in this corridor. There's somebody else here, and they're going through the same thing I am. We are dying. I'm probably not as afraid of death as most people in the United States are, or Western civilization are. Death isn't something that I think about every day, and I just try to live every day and enjoy every day the best that I can. And when death comes, it comes. I think that there is something beyond, and I don't think it's a final situation. I don't think just it's the end of. There's more.
Although we know it seems far-fetched, there may actually be one person who can verify Bruce Kelly's extraordinary experience. Her name, if she exists, is Molly Lassiter. She would have lived near the California-Oregon border in 1938 and would today be around 70 years old. If Molly is out there, perhaps the mystery of Bruce Kelly and James Edward Johnston will at last be solved.
Next, thanks to you, our viewers, a fugitive cult leader accused of rape has finally been tracked down. This is Julie Cooper of Kansas City, Missouri. With her is Tim Santee, the man who rescued Julie from a childhood that she says was nothing short of a living nightmare. When Julie Cooper was just 6, her parents joined a religious cult in Missouri called the DeCloud family. The leader of the sect was a charismatic ex-police officer named Nelson DeCloud.
The Lamb.
Nelson thought that he was God's son. Not really that he was Jesus Christ, but that he was one of God's sons and that he couldn't do any wrong.
Okay, now I want you to stay out here for a little while.
Julie says that by the time she was 10, DeCloud was demanding to have sex with her.
Julie, is what God wants you to do. You understand me?
Yes.
According to Julie, she initially refused, but eventually the pressure became so great that she gave in.
Do you know how old?
And he says, well, are you ready now? And of course, you know, after all that had happened, I just said, yes, you know.
Julie claims that over the next 12 years, she was subjected to constant humiliation and emotional torture by DeCloud, forced to serve as his unwilling sex partner. Finally, in September of 1992, Julie Cooper made her escape, aided by Tim Santee, an electronics repairman. They had met when Tim visited the compound to work on DeCloud's satellite dish.
Last Thursday, I called my friend Tim.
At Tim's urging, Julie went to the police. They immediately issued a warrant for DeCloud's arrest, but before he could be apprehended, DeCloud and his followers disappeared.
I want Nelson to get caught because it's not fair to anyone else that's up there. My mom and dad, they need to know that he isn't the Messiah. He's a criminal. What he was doing was wrong.
After our broadcast, several viewers from San Angelo, Texas, a small town 500 miles from DeCloud's old headquarters in Missouri, called to say they had seen DeCloud's wife in the area.
The cult had apparently settled in this farmhouse. When state and local agents converged on the scene, DeCloud kicked out the screen of the upstairs window in an attempt to escape.
And the deputies approached him, and he tried to wrestle with a few of them briefly. There were so many law enforcement officers, though, that that didn't last very long. They put the handcuffs on him and escorted him out of the building.
Nelson DeCloud was booked at the local county jail and later extradited to Liberty, Missouri to stand trial on 4 criminal counts, including forcible rape and sodomy.
Since the arrest of Nelson DeCloud, other former members of the group have come forward wanting to testify about things they witnessed when they were members of the group.
Nelson DeCloud is currently out on bail thanks to $25,000 raised by followers. A trial is scheduled for November 16, 1993. If convicted on all charges, Nelson DeCloud could spend the rest of his life in prison.
I feel confident now that I can have a normal life after seeing him caught, knowing that it can be done.
For Julie Cooper, her long ordeal is almost, but not quite over. She still has to testify to DeCloud's upcoming trial. However, this courageous young woman has already found a happy ending to her story. Last summer, Julie became engaged to Tim Santee, the man who helped her escape.
Next, Perhaps you can help find a hit-and-run driver whose victim was an 11-year-old boy. Chicago's skyline rises majestically above the southwest tip of Lake Michigan. Yet the city's character is defined largely by the diverse communities which fan out from the shoreline. The Logan Square section of Chicago is a close-knit middle-class neighborhood. Pedro Santiago Jr. was born here and knew Logan Square like the back of his hand. It was a place where he always felt safe. Pedro, a fifth grader, was popular with his peers, a good student and a talented athlete. By the time he was 11 years old, he had already earned a black belt in karate.
Hi, Mom. Just calling to let you know that I'm home.
Oh, good. How did school go today?
On December 12, 1990, Pedro came straight home from school and called his mother at work to fill her in on his plans for the afternoon.
When I'm done with my homework, can I go over to Eric's and show him the ball blaster?
Pedro left his house just after 3 p.m. At that exact moment, 2 neighborhood teenagers were walking back from the corner market.
I never seen anything like that happen, so I couldn't believe that it happened, and I started walking towards the car. And as I seen that it was real, I started running towards the car. The driver, he got out of his car, he started cursing, he started hitting his car. I guess he was upset with himself for doing it. Pedro was, he was trying to talk,
You heard him.
but my friend was telling him, not to waste his energy.
Rick, I'm gonna call an ambulance. Don't let him leave.
Seconds later, the man jumped into his black Oldsmobile and took off.
When I was on the phone talking to the man from the fire station, I seen him pass right by me.
"12 minutes later, Pedro was on his way to the emergency room. The hospital chaplain called Pedro's mother immediately.
When I answered the phone and I heard a voice at the other end, I kind of got shocked. So I said, what happened? And then this other person talked to me and said, it's an emergency. Your son is in the hospital.
Pedro was unconscious and suffering from massive head injuries.
Okay, Pedro, Edith, here he comes.
His parents had only a few precious seconds to comfort him before he was taken into the operating room.
When we got to the surgery room, they said, well, you could kiss him now.
Okay, you can touch him. Move forward. We don't have a lot of time.
We gave him a kiss.
Okay, that's all the time we've got.
And then they took him in. They said surgery would be about an hour and a half or 2 hours. Then we went in the waiting room. And we kept on waiting and waiting.
Pedro hung on for 10 agonizing days, but he never regained consciousness. He was buried on the day after Christmas in 1990. With Pedro's death, the hit-and-run incident escalated to a case of manslaughter. Police had put out an all-points bulletin for the car's owner, a Cuban immigrant known on the streets as Cachimba. When police efforts to find Cachimba failed, Pedro's father began to nose around on his own.
I went to a lot of bars, a lot of places in Chicago. And I asked everybody, did you know Cachimba? He said, yeah, but he left Chicago. It's not in here anymore. And I keep asking everybody until one day I went to this restaurant. I asked the man.
La gente lo conoce como Cachimba.
Ya no viene aquí. He left town a long time ago.
¿Cuándo?
Last time I saw him was around Christmas. He wanted me to lend him some money so he could move to Nueva York.
Did he say why he was moving?
I think he was in some trouble with the police. He had to get out of town, so I gave him $100.
He told me maybe it's in New York now, or Florida, or he gave me a lot of places where the man could be. So I gave it to the police, all those places.
Nearly 2 years have passed with no further leads. For the Santiagos, nothing will ever be the same.
To me, it's like it happened just the other day. It's very hard to let go. I tried, and just the happy times and that we spent with Pedro, and all I see is his smiling face. And yeah, nah. We just miss him a lot.
I know I won't give my son back, but I would like to see him get caught and be him locked up.
Cachimba's real name is Gerardo Gonzalez. He has not been charged with any crime. However, police would like to question him. Cachimba is Cuban, stands 5 feet 8 inches tall, and weighs around 160 pounds. He may be living in New York, Florida, Michigan, or Illinois.
When we return, a 4-year-old girl survives a devastating tornado and then mysteriously disappears. The Woodward, Oklahoma of 50 years ago belonged to a simpler, quieter age. On April 9th, 1947, 2 events were the talk of the town. A popular Ingrid Bergman film had finally arrived at the town's only movie theater. More importantly, a telephone operator's strike had left Woodward's 5,500 residents virtually cut off from the outside world. Had the phones been working that day, Woodward might have gotten news of an impending disaster, a monstrous tornado that had churned its way across Texas and was headed directly towards them. As darkness fell, the giant twister slammed into the town, reducing it to rubble. More than 1,000 people were injured, more than 100 killed, all in a matter of minutes.
Nearly half a century has passed since the disaster. But incredibly, one survivor still remains unaccounted for today. Joan Gay Croft was only 4 years old when she mysteriously disappeared during the chaotic aftermath of the tornado. Although Joan Gay was last seen more than 46 years ago, some members of her family are convinced she is still alive. Perhaps with your help, she will be found tonight. Perhaps she will even be watching.
Joan Gay Croft grew up in one of Woodward's most prominent families.
God is great, God is good. Let us thank Him for our food.
Her father, Olin, was a successful sheep rancher. He was able to provide a comfortable life for the family. His wife, Cleta, her 12-year-old daughter from a previous marriage, and of course, 4-year-old Joan Gay, who was remembered fondly by her great-aunt, Ruth Bond.
She's the most prettiest little old girl I ever seen. She was just perfect. Her little teeth was white as pearls, and she was real bashful. When someone had come in, well, she'd get hold of her mother's dress tail and kind of hide around behind her. She was a mama's girl.
There's such a difference in their age group. I was concerned about that.
April 9th, 1947 had dawned ominously with the sky tinted a reddish cast. That afternoon, Ruth Bond was visiting her sister when the day suddenly grew dark and threatening.
Bertha, do you feel that?
I looked up, and it was just so still that it was really odd.
It's been so windy all day, and it's really calm out. The sky's an odd color.
There wasn't no noise, any kind. The birds wasn't singing. It was just quiet. Time we got home, that thing had hit. We'd hear boards and tin and stuff hit the house, and I just knew that we've never had nothing like this.
When the tornado hit, I stepped out on the front porch and I saw this car coming down the street with all 4 wheels locked up and the wind was pushing it. down the street, and I knew we were in trouble then.
Wind began to blow. It became quite fierce, and we huddled back in the corner of the room to watch the windows blow out and the electric light lines bounce down the street.
It was just a horrible, horrible experience. I was very scared. It lasted 4 to 5 minutes, which seemed like an eternity. We were very lucky. We had broken windows, minor damage, and then Mother and I went to search for our relatives.
Marvella and her mother Ruth joined the survivors streaming to the town's only hospital. Ruth had been unable to find her mother or brother, nor had she heard from Olin Croft and his family.
Marvella, over here.
An eerie calm had settled over an unforgettable scene.
Mama, where are you?
We stepped over bodies. Some of them had their skull all cut off, and some of them had their throats cut. Some of them was dead.
Cleta May?
It was just like wartime if they dropped a bomb. That's just about what it looked like. It was just terrible.
There's Betty Irwin. Betty? Betty? Have you seen my mama? Have you seen my family?
No, I haven't seen your mama, hun, but Joan Gay and Jerry are in the basement.
Ruth learned that her nieces had made it through the tornado. Their father, Olin, was seriously injured. Tragically, their mother, Cleta, was dead.
I thought, oh, no, Lord, it can't be this. It just can't be this, that's all. She was a perfect mother to those kids, and them kids loved her. And that was hard. It was hard. It was real hard.
Joan Gay? Jerry?
Ruth picked her way through the dead and wounded in the hospital basement until she finally found her nieces. Joan Gay's leg had been pierced clear through with a finger-sized splinter of wood. Her sister was bruised from the flying debris.
Well, I thought, my, God saved them both. They're going to be all right because neither one of them was hurt very bad.
Oh, you just think of it as a big old splinter, okay?
I want my mommy and my daddy.
I know where your daddy is. And I'm going to see if I can find your mama.
They're poor kids. I got to tell them Mama's gone, and that was just heartbreaking. So I didn't let on like I even knew, because that wouldn't help those girls at all. They'd have just went hysterical. I'm sure they would have.
Relieved that her nieces were safe, Ruth hurried back outside. There, she finally found her mother and brother.
Mama, Carla, is she going to be all right?
No, Ruth, she's bad. We got to get her to Moreland Hospital.
Mama, can you stand? Do it easy.
When she got to the other hospital, Ruth was pressed into service helping the overburdened doctors and nurses. The next morning, she finally returned to her nieces.
Aunt Ruth.
Where's Joan Gay?
Some men took her.
Some men took her?
Yeah.
Did you know them?
No.
Betty? Betty? What is it, Ruth? Where's Joan Gay?
Well, 2 men came by last night and took her
The
out.
2 men had claimed they were taking the little girl to a hospital in Oklahoma City, some 120 miles distant.
Dr. Jacobson?
But calls to all the hospitals in that area turned up absolutely no trace of Joan Gay Croft. Less than a week after the tornado, Ruth received the phone call she had been dreading, a call from the local mortician.
Franklin?
When the bodies were laid out in the chapel area, their relatives would come in and look at them. Well, when you finally got down, we had 2 left over that nobody had identified.
Franklin? Franklin?
One of the unclaimed bodies was a young blonde-haired girl who bore a striking resemblance to Joan Gay Croft. The mortician asked Ruth to bring some of her niece's clothes to the mortuary.
Ruth, these are too big. It's not your niece.
I pray to God you're right, Franklin.
Ruth insisted on viewing the little girl, just to be sure she was not Joan Gay.
I was really relieved it wasn't our little Joan Gay. That was one burden off my heart right there.
You will find her, Ruth.
I hope so.
With Joan Gay still unaccounted for, her family launched an all-out search.
They listed her missing with all of the law enforcement. FBI, they went to all extremes to look for her. And there was never, ever a trace of her.
After nearly 50 years, the identity of the two men who carried off Joan Gay is a source of lingering speculation. According to Ruth, they asked the nurse very specifically for the Croft children. Had the men known the family? Were they even rescue workers? And where did they take Joan Gay? Whatever the answers, many of Joan Gay's relatives believe she is still alive.
It's a possibility she could be out there alive. I have no idea. I think maybe she might be. Because she wasn't really hurt that bad.
Until somebody can prove to me otherwise, I will always believe, I'll firmly believe she's out there somewhere. And we want to find her and bring her back home.
We'd just have a great big reunion. That's what we'd do. We'd celebrate. Yeah, all of us would.
Very few pictures of Joan Gay Croft survived the tornado. Joan Gay had blue eyes, blonde hair, and at the time spoke with a mild lisp. She would probably still have scars on her left calf from the tornado injury. Joan Gay Croft was 4 years old when she disappeared April 9th, 1947. On our next Unsolved Mysteries, in Australia, a panicky young pilot radios that he's being tailed by a bizarre light source. Seconds later, the pilot and his plane literally vanished from the sky. Some believe it was a close encounter of the most sinister kind. Also, the curious saga of a convicted bank robber who refuses to tell authorities his real name.
The more we kept digging into this gentleman's background, the more mystery surrounded him. Everyone that surrounded him eventually disappeared.
Perhaps someone watching will know his identity and what, if anything, he is trying to conceal. Join me next time for another fascinating edition of Unsolved Mysteries.